Kia ora, welcome to Politics from Canterbury. And if you're one of the couple of hundred discerning viewers wondering where we were, we're just a little bit busy. We wrote an article, but today we're joined by history student, as in we were students of history, we're not historians. Liam Foster knows a lot about Iraq, not so much about politics, but that's okay. This man today joining us, Will Hall, does know a lot about politics, politics student, and
formerly a student. So I'll just make my disclosure now.
Disclosure.
Yep. Formerly interned in Nicola Willis's parliamentary office, currently the head of strategy for the Opportunities Party, and personally advising Raf Manji on all things politics related. So, yeah.
And thank you. You brought along our Raf Manji poster for Ireland because we are coming at you straight out of Ireland.
Well, I see your street has quite a few of them on and around. So, I could have just bought some from inside, but
yeah, we don't steal Raf Manji posters here.
More the merrier.
What we'd like to start off talking about is there was a debate last week. I went and attended it. It had all the candidates from Ireland, and it had a poll out that showed Raf Manji wasn't doing as badly as Shane Jones in Northland, which is quite badly, but was sort of even Stevensing it with the Labour candidate, but National was quite a bit ahead. Fill us in on how you thought the debate went and how the campaign's going.
Oh, look, I think the campaign's going great. We're a minor party. Outside of Parliament, everything we do is significantly harder than Labour or National doing anything. Now, there have been a few polls floating around for quite a while. The Nats have been polling for a long time with Courier, having lots of varying results there. We've seen some internal polling. Look, we think it's pretty tight between Hamish and Raf. I think the issue with the poll last Tuesday, 400 people, you're hardly going to get a great result. 11% of people were trying to vote for parties that aren't running candidates. Then you've got the whole undecided. People are really undecided, and I think actually what that says is the electorate as a whole is not turned on to politics, both at a local level and a national level. I think winter, we've all been pretty depressed, the state of the economy, so many other things. And ultimately, the campaign's only started in the last week, technically. So 5 weeks to go. I think the fact that top here in Ireland is neck and neck, I think is really good. And it shows that we can only go up from here.
Okay. I've heard on the old campaign traps, and I've heard that a lot of national candidates appear not to have outside jobs because they do a lot of door knocking. And I was just wondering, I know Hamish Campbell himself, the national candidate, has done a lot of door knocking. And I was wondering where some of the money that National's got, whether it is going to pay candidates, which is another rumour, to basically be paid to go around campaigning. Because I've heard that I think Banks Peninsula, there's been a lot of door knocking. So National's gone for that more classic door knocking.
I wouldn't like to speculate, of course, on where money's going and whatnot. I think door knocking is a really important part of election campaign. I think for National, their biggest advantage in Ireland is having a base of support, of people that say, yeah, I'm a national person. It means that when they send out an email, and they have really good email databases, they can go, hey, do you guys want to do some door knocking? And they will find people who will. And that whole network and infrastructure of a major party is a big advantage for them across the country. Now, we know people, generally speaking, want to change a government. That's, the right direction, wrong direction. That's what it's showing. Now, I think for a lot of people, that 2 ticks mentality is the easier thing for them to understand. It's, if I 2 ticks National, the government will change. And that's a line National have been pushing. I don't think that takes into account the electoral maths.
We'll try and get Liam into jump into this.
I just got a quick question. So you both went to the debate.
Yeah.
What were the main topics or points of contention between the candidates?
Well, what I thought, I'll just give you my quick thought. Basically, they were asking people who aren't going to be making any policy. They were asking supreme backbenchers questions on crime and the cost of living. And I found the whole thing quite dull. I did find Mr. Manji's take slightly more interesting because he's the leader of a party and is a bit of a lone wolf.
And so
freedom
to speak.
He had the freedom to speak. What I found was the Labour, National and Green candidates were they'd read their party policy and then they regurgitated it. And then there were some people at the debate, I'm not sure, they weren't from National, they weren't from Labour, they weren't from the Greens, they were maybe probably not New Zealand First, we don't know. They yelled the whole time and they hurt my ears.
Yeah. There was a grouping of volunteers from Democracy in New Zealand who seemed to be quite vocal, and their candidate was in the crowd, Ireland candidate. That sort of reception you're going to get everywhere at this election. In terms of what policies were discussed, it was quintessentially an episode of the working group here in Ireland with the local candidates. So one of the things they were talking about was crime, cost of living, and you're right, backbenchers aren't going to have much of an effect on that. Now,
what do you think the big issues for Ireland are?
Well,
here's a freebie. We're giving you a free question.
I think the big issue when you're actually talking to people on the doorstep, door knocking, chlorinated water. Yeah. Like, now, if you're in Wellington or Auckland, writing and reporting, the water chlorine issue must seem insane to you. Why do people care what water comes out when the tap gets turned on? And you can be like my grandma in Bishopdale. She has a filter thing attached to her water, and that fixes it. But for a lot of people, it's a bigger issue. It's around Wellington coming down here and explaining what has to happen to Christchurch. Now, post the earthquakes, there was no waterborne infection anywhere in Christchurch, which is impressive. For half the CBD fell down, but all the water was good to go. Now, there were boil notices as a precaution, but the water here in Canterbury is actually pretty decent compared to a lot of the world. Now, I think where the issue has come for locals is partially incorporated in Three Waters, or what are they calling it now? The reform.
I stood for local government last election, and Liam was there in the hall. We went along, and I don't necessarily hate all of Three Waters, and I said I was playing a bit of devil's advocate there, and I barely got out of that hall without being lynched, Liam. Because they don't like Three Waters, and they don't like the chlorine in the water in this election.
And I think here in Christchurch, the message that was given to water post Havelock North was, look, you need to do A, B, and C to bring your water up to 21st century standards. Now, no one would disagree that more investment into water isn't wanted. Now, the council went and did that, and they went back to the government and said, okay, can we stop chlorinating our water? That's what the public want. Now, the public representatives around here, your Sam McDonald's, your Jamie Goths, etc., this is a big backbone issue for them. So if their voters every 3 years come over and say, we don't like chlorine being in the water, that's the only thing you're gonna hear about. Now, I think this comes back to the issue of the whole debate on Tuesday. Well, that's a real local issue. Now, what's the Labour Party's or National's policy on Christchurch chlorination? Well, they're not going to have an individual policy for a city. I mean, neither of the major parties are going to come down to Christchurch and say, yep, we will give you an exemption over every other city in the country, are they?
Yeah, and I guess that's what I thought was a bit lacking in the debate. It was a debate on local issues that had no local issues.
And this is constantly the issue we have when you have a mixed member proportionate system jammed together with a first past the post model. You've got these first past the post electorate races that are meant to be about really down to earth local issues, like do the traffic lights work good enough, what's the parks like, etc. You then have a party machine going on in the background that's trying to have these highly coordinated, highly organized campaigns, and I think we've got to the point in MMP where the two have come together and functionally we can't move further forward from them.
Speaking of that, party launches.
Okay, so we're going to do a quick fire round.
Sure.
Party launch, I've got Christopher Luxon's children. I thought that was quite a nice touch. I thought the ad was a little mean in the Herald today, but what I wanted to do is it's a Twitter quick fire.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, because
X, formerly known as Twitter.
X, yeah. Essentially, the mainstream media have got the big issues covered, but I've got some small issues. Number one, does James Shaw, that's the co-leader of the Greens, he's not as well known as Christopher Luxon and other people, does he have a Bachelor of Arts? Ian Wishart, investigative journalist Ian Wishart, believes that James Shaw doesn't have a Bachelor of Arts, despite the fact that James Shaw has electronically on his LinkedIn says he has a Bachelor of Arts. In 2015, James Shaw said he couldn't be bothered finishing his Bachelor of Arts. Does he have a Bachelor of Arts or not?
What is the prerequisite to being a politician? It's not required, is it, a Bachelor of Arts?
Bachelor of Arts isn't required. It's not. You can't be thrown out of Parliament for not having a Bachelor of Arts.
It's just the claim that he's being deceptive. Is that correct?
I think so, and this is it's to do with the fact that all of this stuff about was it ACT Party candidates, their Twitter's being looked into, and they're sharing perhaps the wrong stuff, and so it's that whole battle behind the scenes.
So I have a similar family story with my uncle who moved down here to Christchurch to go to UC, did his engineering degree until the last exam where he went, "No, I'm good," and never finished it. Now, when he goes to job interviews, he says that story exactly.
Yeah.
Now, look, if he's going around saying, yes, I have a Bachelor of Arts, and he doesn't, well, you need to correct the record. Is it the end of the world? Well, I think the Green Party have bigger issues than just whether or not James Shaw has a Bachelor of Arts or not. I'm sure there's enough Bachelor of Arts in the Green Party that they can, all go around.
Probably a couple of PhDs.
But, Well, yeah, hopefully, there must be a PhD somewhere in the top row of.
Just trying to think
of the Greens.
Dr. Kennedy Graham, but he left on a rather sour note. So, the other one, Thomas Cramner, who turns out to be. Basically, it's a Twitter handle for a lawyer that was posting a lot of stuff about how the media... You'll never read this in the media because he's posting about how the media get money from the government.
Right.
But I find him kind of interesting. He got outed last week as Philip Crump, Barry Crump's second cousin.
Okay.
So does anyone follow Thomas Cramner here?
I have in the past. He sometimes puts a lot of stuff on Twitter.
Yeah.
A lot. I don't know if it's... how good it is, but what's he tweeted?
The tweet I had was about Stuff launched the whole tweet Stuff launched the whole truth in 2020 as an elect fact-checking project. It was then reimagined as a project to counter COVID misinformation, and that, guys, it was funded by a Google grant, then by 591,000 from New Zealand On Air. So if you're interested in that kind of sort of stuff, you won't probably find it on Stuff. Or the Herald, but you may find it on Thomas Cramner. So I found him kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And lastly, my old buddy Clint Smith in Wellington, he was highlighting National's campaign launch, and I did like this. He said, the wild tonal shifts, poor lighting and overdone music remind me of a film we did at high school. Not sure what film Clint did, but he goes, I like where he goes, and he means Christopher Luxon. It could be so much better. This is the best country in the world. This isn't as good as it gets. Confusing. What do we think? What do we think of Christopher Luxon's magnum opus 3-minute?
I think it's a trend among politicians in National, ACT and New Zealand First. This sort of reminiscing for a past that New Zealand may or may not have had.
The 1970s was sunnier.
Well, it's warmer nowadays, which some people might like. But I think for all of those parties, it's take New Zealand back, get New Zealand back on track. And I guess what they mean is back under a national government. But, things weren't all right. They weren't all good. There's a reason in 2017 people voted National out of government. And it's because they'd spent 9 years... And areas of the economy, we saw a lot of growth through immigration. In other parts of the economy, the infrastructure completely was overwhelmed, whether that's roading infrastructure, housing infrastructure, education, hospitals, all that sort of thing. Or you had a period of time where, we saw, women out of the workplace, or, minorities,
something bad, but
it's a question for National of, do they think it was better under their last government than the current government? And in their mind, they would say yes. Now, having heard John Key speak the other day at the Ilex Cafe in the Botanical Gardens here in Christchurch, he was very thoughtful of his time in office. And he said there were mistakes that were made. One of them being the debt to GDP ratio that Labour, New Zealand First and the Greens went so hard on in 2017, and saying it probably hampered the growth of this country. So, you know, your former leaders going around saying, yes, not everything we did back under my leadership was great, but now a new leader's come along, a man who spent all of his time, not inside the country, has come back and said, yep, let's bring it back to a period of time. My former, the guy in my position formerly agrees that wasn't great. And, you know, I think this is the whole issue for National, is they keep re-releasing policy, from, the good old days of Bill, social investment and all those sort of things. But the country has changed so much, and the ideology of the National Party has shifted in the past 6 years, probably further to the right, and they've had to accommodate more, what I would call sort of the Christian right. And I think it's a big problem in communicating their narrative for the country, because they themselves don't know what they're doing. Is it we're going back to John Key, Keynomics, or is this Christopher Luxon's leadership? And I don't think he knows.
Okay, well, here's my final thought.
Yes, yeah.
It's Labour and National battling out in the early 30s, and it's Winston Peters riding in on a horse. Because Winston Peters' Twitter, with Winston jumping on a horse radio
the radio ad.
The radio ad. That's 100,000 hits in a day.
Yes.
So check that one out. Thank you very much, Liam. Thank you very much.
Oh, sweet, we're done. All right, cool. Sweet.
We'll do one more quicker.
Oh, really?